Is Ivanhoe gonna be an undercover FBI agent?
Dude, I kept thinking people were undercover. I kept thinking people were undercover FBI agents. I thought, I don't know why I thought the wife was a fucking undercover.
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched.
I
finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally
Watched.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Milan, and I finally watched BlacKkKlansman.
And this is David, and I also finally watched BlacKkKlansman.
Well, what did your cracker ass think about this movie?
I mean, I think have to say I love it. No, I say like for most of this movie, I was like, is this my new favorite Spike movie?
Yeah.
Um, it it just was very funny. It's obviously making a point in a very smart way. Um, and then towards the end, there was a couple things where I was like, I don't know, is that really good writing? Is that a little bit lazy? Is it like, are the characters sort of like a character would never do that? Is he making a point? And I never really got an answer on what I'm talking about, and I know I'm being very vague, but we'll talk about them when we get there. I mean, overall, it was great, and it ticked a lot of like Spike Lee boxes that I wanted. I noticed in Miracle at St. Anna we did not get a dolly shot, and in this one we got a double person dolly shot with the Inside Man score playing as they rolled down the hallway. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Everything you wanted and more. We also got the double hug cut, the one I talked about, but you don't seem to notice. But instead of a hug, it's actually him when he puts the phone down on the receiver. We get a double shot of that.
I did notice that one this time, and I was like, I guess that's what Alon's talking about.
It's usually done in a hug, but yeah. So it was done in a receiver. Um, yeah. I is this my new favorite Spike? I think it's a movie that probably gives more to the general audience than most of his other movies. It seemed more like blockbuster-ish than niche, if that makes sense. Um, I think that also has to do with like Adam Driver being in it because he was so like um, popular at the time this movie came out. I think more towards the point of what you were talking about towards the end, though, and we will get into detail about that. But it did seem like the writing seemed very on the nose, like too on the nose at times.
Yeah, yeah. I mean the one dude in the party saying, "Yeah, I want to make America great again," and then one of the most on the nose point to me was when the like second in command was telling John David Washington, which I'm going to use real names because otherwise it's confusing if I'm talking about the fake Ron or the real Ron.
Right.
Um, he was like, "Oh well, David Duke, he's running for president," and John David Washington very pointedly says, no racist white guy like that would ever be elected president. I was like, why don't you just look in the camera after you say it too? Like,
You had a
why
little
don't
wink.
yeah. So I mean, there's certain parts here and there that like, I don't know, like you said, could have been a little too on the nose. But overall, I mean, it's great, so funny. Um, maybe in ways that like would make you uncomfortable to laugh, but still hilarious. And then other like I think other moments were just like so for example, this movie does not commit the crime that some do where like we talked about Miracle Saint Anna where it showed like, oh, maybe this is a good German, right? This didn't show any good racists. And I think some of the most like amazing parts to me were Felix and his wife like in bed, right? Just
Oh
talking
my
about like
god.
how
Yeah.
excited they were to kill black people. And just like it was like a normal thing, like, oh, we're going on our anniversary trip. It's like, oh, we've been looking forward to this. And so just like kind of showing the blasé nature of like super racist people.
Yeah, and not just racist people, but like uh people who I mean I guess, um the Jews are a race, but more of a religion factor. But being anti-Semitic and then being homophobic, Like that all clumps into the KKK nature.
Yeah, and there's one big point I want to make, and I don't know, maybe I belabored this too much in the Jojo Rabbit episode. Um, but Jojo Rabbit was, and very vaguely when people argue about this, was like you shouldn't make a parody movie like that at a time like this when anti-Semitism is so high. Like, are those same people offended by BlacKkKlansman? Because like it's kind
Um,
of the exact same thing.
it is. You know how we said Miracle at St. Anna is like if like Inglorious Bastard was directed by Spike Lee. This is like if Django Unchained was directed by Spike Lee.
But this is a little less like of a like a low stakes frivolous nature that Jojo Rabbit is a lot of the times, right? But this is a straight parody of the KKK and racism, like with like and a lot of the blowback from Jojo Rabbit was like, oh, you're saying a lot of these anti-Semitic things. There's a lot of anti-black language used in this movie, and it's like even if you look at like, oh well, Spike's black, so he's okay. I mean, Taika's part Jewish, so it's like they are apples to apples, and so it's just like it is interesting to me, like someone who had a problem with that
But
movie, what like how they would feel differently about this movie. It's just I
but
don't know.
you're saying it like Black Klansman didn't have any backlash when I pretty sure I'm certain that it did when
I
it
think
came out.
from the group it had black backlash from was the people it was like directly
The
pointed at. The
KKK. No, I think like in a general audience sort of way, people had problems with this movie, and I don't know. I mean, I don't agree with the people who had problems with Jojo Rabbit. Jojo Rabbit's one of my favorite movies that we reviewed, possibly in my top 5, top 10, definitely.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I didn't want to go too in depth into this. I really just wanted to point out like they are such similar, like conceptually movies, right? Like
w-
of
what I'm
what.
saying though is that people who have problems with Jojo Rabbit, they're a bunch of pansies. So
Okay, that's good. That's very good. Um, I think we should just get into it, honestly, because this movie, like you texted me and you were like, "How are we going to talk about this movie?" And my first thought was like, "Well, very carefully." But I do think as it goes along, as it builds, the story choices are kind of interesting, and the way it goes, and the way it sort of makes you feel like I've said so many times how I hate the like, oh no, are they going to get caught? You know what I mean? Like, kind of like people making stupid decisions that, oh, are they going to get caught? Are they going to, what I mean? The tension, right? I don't know. I just, tension in movies really gets to me.
the
And
suspense and the tension, yeah.
the payoff of this movie is so great.
Well, this movie gives you so many things to worry about, and then it's just like tied off with a nice little bow at the end that you're like, "Oh, I didn't have anything to worry about."
Sort of yes and no. I mean, there's a couple things that too, like to me, like seem like they're unanswered, or maybe I don't know. That's it's all of this revolves around the chief to me, which we'll talk about as we go through.
The chief of police?
Yeah, the
Oh, okay.
Colorado Springs chief of police. So this starts with the movie showing it's a Confederate movie of like them, having lost the war. And what I now realize was Scarlett O'Hara. I've never seen Gone with the Wind, but that was apparently like the end of Gone with the Wind or part of Gone with the Wind, where she's going around as these Confederate soldiers are sitting there. Um, and then you have the Alec Baldwin speech, which is like so funny, and like the way he's flubbing his lines and going over them again, and like getting
Yeah.
fed lines, and like is really great.
I thought I don't know if he's playing someone specific, but if you and I knew Topher Grace was in this movie playing David Duke. But if you didn't know that, you could almost think that Alec Baldwin is playing David Duke.
Right. Yeah, he was like something Beauregard. What was his name's in here? Dr. Kennebrew Beauregard, which I don't know. I don't know my racist history that
I don't
much
know
to
my
know who that
racist
is.
either, so
Yeah,
that's good
so
on us.
or
But
bad on us. I don't know, depending on the
it
way you look at it.
this movie starts in a much similar way that Miracle at St. Anna did, with like the cold open of like someone just talking directly to the camera. Alec Baldwin, not as sexy as the Nazi woman from Miracle at St. Anna, but
Depends on
well,
your orientation. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
And then it gets directly into it where John David Washington drives up to Colorado Springs and he's interviewed by two guys. One of them, Isaiah Whitlock Jr., who, yeah, once
Shit.
again, gives us what you want. And then they sort of ask him, and this is like the kind of the ultimate question of this movie, and it comes up again and again. It's like, if you like have to deal with racism on this force, are you going to be okay with it? And he's like, well, should I have to? And he's like, it might come up. And he's like, can you turn the other cheek? And he's like, maybe if I need to, I can. And it comes up again and again.
Yeah.
And then he's immediately put in the records room, and he, it is kind of funny that like you can understand the rest of the police being like, dude, you're new. Like, what the fuck are you like? Why are you?
Why are
Why
you
are
like
you? Yeah,
so gun ho about getting like a promotion so
you
fast?
belong in the records room for at least a couple of days. Like, and he's just like, I fucking hate it in here. I guess we don't know how long he's been in there. Um, and then he goes up to the police. Should I shave the natural? Is there anything else I can do to, I want to go undercover? And he's like, no, I want you right where you are, and I like your afro. Like, it's fine.
I don't think he meant it like in a positive way, but it's funny too because it kind of positions the chief as being as bad as that guy from that what TV show was that? Lie to Me, the real racist skinny cop that was there. He was in a show I used to watch way back when, but
So his name
um
is Landers in the movie. His name is
yeah.
Fred Weller in real life. He is the son of, I think, Peter Weller, the original RoboCop.
Oh.
And Robert John Burke, who plays Chief Bridges in this movie,
Was in
was
RoboCop.
he was RoboCop 3, I believe.
Oh wow. Okay, I see it. I see it. A lot of RoboCop references. No, but the thing about it is that he's like the worst. He's almost just as bad as David Duke and the rest of
I
the
thought he was going to
racists.
end up being in the Klan. Like, I thought that was like where this was going.
I was watching this with Taylor and she was like, he's gonna be on their side at the end of this. I just know it. I was like, no, he's gonna die. I was like, something bad is gonna happen to this guy. Um, but the part where it's like, okay, so all the cops in this precinct are racist, you think. um Even Adam Driver in the beginning when you meet him isn't like the greatest representation of
Well, he's just
him.
he's like unwelcoming, and it's like a rookie. So you don't really. I think it's purposefully. You don't really know what his deal is.
But then you have the chief where you think it's going to be just as bad, but then the chief turns out to be pretty good.
I don't know about that.
Isn't that great? Isn't that great? But he stuck
Well,
up
let's
for
just
him
say now.
a couple
So
times.
I for the whole movie thought he was going to be a KKK member too.
A secret KKK member?
I did, and then when he shuts down the investigation with no explanation, and everyone knows it's kind of bullshit, I expected him to like reveal himself on the hill, but I think it kind of almost makes more sense to not have that because it's like the racism that like black people have to deal with always isn't just like a hooded Klan member. Sometimes it's just a person in authority who like shuts down something that could help black people. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't have to be a KKK member to hurt
Yeah.
John David Washington and the cause he's going for. It's just
But it
like he fucks it over just in his regular capacity.
but it doesn't even feel like he's fucking it over personally. It's like his higher ups are fucking it
Well,
over.
we don't get an answer to that. That's kind of the confusion to me is like we don't really understand what happened.
Okay. Okay.
Which there is a book, so um
By it's a true story because it's by Ron
Stallworth, yeah.
Stallworth. Yeah,
You
whatever.
sort of just sort of gave up on the end of that name.
I did. Stallworth.
Uh,
But it's based on a true story. Do you think he actually had that actual conversation with David Duke?
so I was gonna get to this in the end, but yeah, like most of that stuff with David Duke happened. Apparently, David Duke did not find out until 2006 that Ron Stallworth was black. Like there was no the conversation at the end where he reveals himself. That didn't
Yeah.
happen, even though it's like one of the best parts of the movie. And Topher Grace just sitting there like dumbfounded is so fucking great. And then
R
ap-
R.
apparently something I read
Uh-huh.
was that when this movie was coming out, David Duke, the real David Duke, called the real Ron Stallworth upset about the way he was going to be portrayed in this movie as like an idiot. So,
And it
which
showed a picture of the real David Duke at the end of this movie.
correct, yes, it did. Yeah, at the what, Unite the Right rally or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
Um, so the chief changed his mind pretty quickly, and he's like, "Yeah, you can come in because we now actually need a black guy now because we're worried about the Black Panthers." Is what I don't even know. Was it? Yeah, I guess it was a Black Panther
It
speech.
was the Black Panthers, but it was almost like a resurgence, because the Black Panthers were really big during the Vietnam War, which just ended at the beginning of this movie.
You asking that as a question?
Kind of. I'm pretty certain. I mean, they kept asking why did you serve in the Vietnam, or why didn't you serve, or have you served in the Vietnam War? So, this movie is so like this movie has references to present time, and it's so like modern day, like modernly shot and everything, that sometimes I forget it's a period piece.
Yeah, so apparently the film takes place in 1972, although the real investigation took place between 1978 and 1979. I was like, I had no clue when this was supposed to take place. I guess I wasn't really paying attention to like,
In the beginning it says the year and the place and everything.
okay, all right, well that makes sense then. I should have written that down. So he goes to this Black Panther, basically just a meeting. It's a speech by Kwame Ture, I believe his name is now, and I radicalize is too far of a word, I guess, but it's sort of like the speech gets to John David Washington. It's interesting that like his character is basically a blank slate when he comes into this movie. We like know nothing about him really.
Kind of yes, kind of no. There's this moment, and you have little moments throughout, kind of like fleshing out his character. He's kind of a giant nerd, right? He's just a giant geek. And you see this, like, he's in the records room, and like the guy leaves, and he like karate chops the air and like does like a spinning little kick. And so I don't know. And then he talks about like Shaft and like different black
Like
exploitation films and stuff like that, like his not his idols, but like, people that he's a fan of, or like little fanboyish of. And I don't know, I get what you're saying, but then you get these like snippets of like his nerdism.
I guess I don't know. I feel like also he plays in a lot of movies. He plays sort of a blank slate, like Tenet.
Yeah.
Um, you saw The Creator. I haven't seen it yet. So I don't,
He's yeah. I mean, I really like the creator, but I see what you mean. That's just kind of his acting style almost.
yeah. I also, just to say this now, I was like, you know, having Topher Grace just play himself as David Duke, I was like, I don't know, man. It's just, and then they show the real David Duke at the end. I was like, you know what? Pretty fucking close, honestly.
Like
Like, not
you mean
bad.
as himself, like no prosthetics and no like facial hair or makeup. It's just Topher fucking Grace,
I
or
mean, he kind of looked like him too. I don't. Yeah, I
like
don't need prosthetics.
what you would imagine like a 40 years ago David Duke would look like.
I mean, I guess I don't know. I just think with the hair and everything, it kind of looked close. I think Topher Grace. It's kind of odd. Like he's a good actor. He doesn't do like character stuff. I've never seen him play anything else, but he is good. And like I don't know, it's just it's weird when you have someone who's like he was just playing this kind of normal, that 70s show. It's just like not a stretch for anything, right? And then the next thing I saw him in was, he did a lot of rom-coms. He did his like he played himself in Ocean's 11.
Yeah.
And then, you see this and you're like, I don't know, is he good? Is he? And he was very good in this. It's just now he's got a very distinct voice, very distinct way of talking. Like,
I think if you're going to play like an iconic racist that everyone pretty much associates like the KKK with and stuff, I think it's better to be a famous actor than a nobody doing this, because you can get into a trap where not just typecast, but people will like hate you because they associate you with this character, because it's at this point maybe in your career it's the only character you play. Um but having it someone so iconic like Topher Grace, like everyone knows who Topher Grace is, it's like you can't be mad at the actor for this role. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't think anyone was gonna be mad because, like, I don't know, he sort of gets his comeuppance at the end a little bit. Did you notice, like, how well shot the speech was? Like, the focusing in on different people in the audience and then almost just, like, removing all the background and showing faces pop up here and there,
Yeah.
and then showing, like, the way it affected John David Washington. Because that was actually what I was talking about is, like, the blank slate thing. Like, we don't really know, like we know he always wanted to be a cop because he says that, but we don't know, like, how, how much, for lack of a better way of saying it, like, how much he cares about black issues, like the people at this rally that he's going to as an undercover cop, right? We don't know any of that background. And so to see him that affected by this, that he's like, he goes the next day. Well, he goes out with Patrice and she tells him about the racist cop feeling her up. But the next day he goes to the chief and he's like, we don't have to worry about them. Nothing's going to happen there. And Adam Driver backs him up. And then leading to the next thing, he sees this KKK advertisement. He's like, let me turn this job into something that's going to benefit, black people.
It, at that point, I was kind of confused because I was like, is he just putting his fist up and like being like, hell yeah, brother? Like, is he just doing that for like the look of being undercover, being like, all right, I need to look like I'm into this just so I don't look suspicious? Or is it really like affecting him in this way, being like, okay, now he's feeling some sort of way about it?
I think, and it's some of the best acting from him in this. I think he was very subtle in the way that, like, as the speech go went along, it turned more from I'm pretending to not stand out to this is actually affecting me. Is the way I like that it looked to me.
And then I wondered how much of it he's just saying to get in Patrice's pants.
I mean, that's true too, because that is definitely a goal of his. So the next day, he calls the KKK. This is the funniest scene to me.
It's one of the funniest scenes.
He's like, "So what's your story?" And he's like, "Man, I'm glad you asked." He's like, "I really hate N-words." And like, and then just goes on a list of other groups of people he hates. Um, and just all the cops like slowly turn around and start looking at him. He goes on and on, sets up a meeting, and then Adam Driver's like, "Did you use your real fucking name?" And he's like, "Oh shit." He's like, "All right, way to go, man." And then we're like, we're off. But that scene is just like the timing of like him saying that, and then everyone starts to stare at him. It's just
So
hilarious.
so you know that scene where they're like in the back of the locker and then he's trying to get the rhythm so sorry. Adam Driver is trying to get the rhythm of his white guy talk
Uh
to
huh.
his talk so they sound alike when Adam Driver inevitably meets the rest of the KKK. And then but then he's talking like jive and Adam Driver has to copy that. I don't get that part. Why does he have to sound like Ron Stallworth not being white?
I don't think. I don't know. I think it was probably just. It almost felt like a voice exercise of like, you can sound like me anyway. But I mean, what's funny is they're like, oh, I can talk jive and I can talk white is something the real Ron says, but it's like he talks the same throughout the entire movie. Like he never sounded different to me, whether he was with the other cops, whether he was on the phone with David Duke, or whether he was talking to Patrice. He constantly sounded like he talked the exact same.
See, I don't agree with you there because his normal voice, how he talks to like the other cops and the chief, is like his normal voice. That's the way he just talks. And then the way he talks to the KKK members, it's like he's inflecting a little bit to be sounding more white. But then when he talks to Patrice, I feel like he goes way the other way of really trying to sound jive.
my my friend Anthony, he had a white person voice. He's black. He had a white person voice he put on for people. I remember it was the hilarious thing one time. He called a guy about a car because he was like forever looking for a car, and he's like, "Hello, yes, I'm interested in your da 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 da." And then the guy spoke, and the guy was black, and it just disappeared in a snap. He just started talking like himself again. And I was
Oh.
just like, yeah, I think that was like at 16 when I was introduced to code switching, but really like the black man white voice. I don't know. I didn't hear that much of a difference. So they set up the meeting, and Adam Driver goes and he meets this guy Felix. Dude, the guy that plays Felix is fucking Finnish.
Oh, really?
He looks like the most southern racist guy. Like, just he's
Let me ask you
great.
something. Let me ask you something. How surprised were you to not see Walter Goggins in this movie?
Well, I think this dude Jasper took the role, honestly. Um, well, it's Walton. Walton Goggins. He plays the smart redneck, the one that you underestimate, that always, comes
Yeah.
out on top.
And none of them were those. So
Definitely not. And I think, yeah, like his name's Jasper in real life, but Felix is like someone who thinks he's smart, but has this undercurrent of he's a complete idiot. So, like, I don't know. I think he works perfectly for that. Apparently, when he went out for the job, when he did his, it's not an interview when you act, it's an
it's an
audition.
audition.
There we go. Couldn't think of that fucking word. He was just pretending to be American the whole time, and then like finally at the end, Spike was like, "Well, wait, what are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm Finnish." And he's like, "I didn't even know, so you get the job."
Yeah. No, that I man, I went to like an acting school when I was little, and I remember someone was talking, like a instructor was talking about actors going into casting directors and completely like being their character, and then afterwards being like a totally normal person, and that impressed them so much that they like I've heard that a lot. Like people just do that. Um the the next scene we get is Adam Driver going to meeting up. Actually, so the guy he was talking to on the phone was not Felix.
That was
Felix was the guy,
Walter.
right? And Felix met up with him. So then they go to meet Walter, and it's this bar, I guess. It's not the house yet, but it's a bar where you meet I don't know his name, but the dumbest motherfucker.
It's Ivanhoe, and it's Paul Walter Hauser, who is just like one of the best actors out right now for playing like he's the guy from I Tanya.
Oh, he is like the typecast to like the stupid guy with the schemes, huh?
Well, I know, but he also played Richard Jewell in the Clint Eastwood movie, and I don't know, he's a great actor, and yeah, he's the character's a little over the top, but it's also like I don't know, people like that exist, but yeah, it's a really funny scene. I love when he's like, I hate all black people, and he's like, well, I forget how it gets brought up, but the Felix is like, you're forgetting about Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima, and he's like, damn, kind of like them, rice and pancakes.
There was times where as he was talking, I was thinking like, oh, maybe he secretly likes black people. Like it kind of reminded me of that Do the Right Thing scene where he was like talking about Frank Sinatra and like all the, you know what scene I'm talking about?
Yeah,
With
where Turturro's he's like, man, your favorite people are black people. And
yeah.
he's like, no, I like Springsteen. He's like, nah, man, you like Prince. I know what you're talking about. I was like, is Ivanhoe gonna be an undercover FBI agent?
Dude, I kept thinking people were undercover. I kept thinking people were undercover FBI agents. I thought I don't know why I thought the wife was a fucking undercover. But when you first see her, you know what I thought she was gonna do? I thought she was gonna because he treated her so badly. I thought she was gonna turn on him, but she was so indoctrinated it didn't matter at that point.
Yeah. She's gonna pull a gun. Freeze, FBI.
Ow, motherfucker!
Um so they take him to the back office, and I love when he just goes over the fees, and he's like $10 for this, $15 for this, robes and hoods not included. Fucking Ivanhoe's like fucking inflation. Oh man, just like the small intricacies of like the monotony of like, oh, we have to do our $15 a year fee, and like, oh, but you got to buy your robes on your own. You got, like, probably got to go get fitted somewhere for it. I don't know. Just like the
Have you seen that Dave Chappelle skit where he plays the blind KKK leader? Okay.
yes, obviously.
Well, don't say obviously. I just heard about it today.
Wow. Yeah. So Jordan Peele actually brought this to Spike Lee, and Spike Lee was like, "What is that? You just doing the Dave Chappelle skit?" And he's like, "No, it's a real story." And then Spike Lee like read it and came onto it. But yeah, like
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of people when this came out were like, "You just fucking stole the Dave Chappelle skit." Um, it's not that obviously. So there's a scene right after this where Adam Driver is like sort of hesitant that he thinks these people are actually like dangerous, kind of like the parallel to when John David Washington was like, "Oh, the people at the Black Panther meeting were not dangerous," and he's like, "Ah, I don't know," and John David Washington's like, "No, I know. This is serious," and it's a little bit at that point maybe he wants it to be serious. Although Ivanhoe at one point, who's like stupid, but also seems to be drunk the entire movie, was like hits two pool balls together and go like there's big
Like,
explosions this
what do you
year.
know about C4? Do you know about C4? Where I can get some?
Yeah. So we're at the stakeout at I guess it's at Felix's house. I keep fucking forgetting his name. And his wife is like the funniest part where she like starts talking and he's like, "All right, honey, that's enough." She's like, "You know, one day you're gonna need something from me. I just want you to remember this." Like, I'm gonna go to the kitchen now. Oh, and then when he takes him downstairs, he's the Jew lie detector. And he's like, "I get it. You're just trying to see my big Jew dick. Is that what this is?"
When John David Washington hears him being like, pull down your pants because I want to see if you're what did he say, circumvented?
He said that, but then he's like, "You guys got that weird penis thing, right? Like yours is different than ours somehow."
um, which also reminded me of the Jojo Rabbit scene where they're like, Jews have wings and horns and stuff like that. Like they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Stupid racists. Um, the part where John David Washington gets scared that, oh shit, he's gonna be found out, so he runs to the front door, is so cool. So he throws this rock through the window, right? And then all the racists, including Adam Driver, run out. And then Adam Driver like jumps fucking over Felix, grabs his gun, and then shoots at John David Washington driving away. But you can tell, and it's so well done, that he purposely missed up the driveway or up the street.
Yep.
And
He
I
shot right behind the car each time.
each time in perfect, like in a perfect row. And I got so angry when the next couple scenes later where they're at the shooting range and they bet that Adam Driver can't hit the target or whatever. I got pretty pissed actually that he did so well because I was like, you should have fucking purposely missed.
Yeah, but he couldn't. He had to let him know how
Well,
good he was.
Felix got suspicious though.
He did. He did get suspicious. Um, and I like how the second in command after this, he's like, "A fucking shooting? Like, if the chief finds out about this, he's like, well, is he gonna find out about it?" And he's like, I guess not." And then the next scene, John David Washington is trying to get Adam Driver's card, and he's like, "I need you at this cross burning." And he calls, and he's like, "Who am I talking to?" He's like, "David Duke," and he's like, "Oh fuck."
Yeah. Yeah.
And like without these phone calls, you don't really have the like it's still a movie, but like the fact that this dude was on the phone like weekly, daily, whatever, with the biggest racist of the KKK, a guy who was going to run for president. I like that is really why this movie like gets made, why the book was written, you know what I mean? Like it's like a crazy part of the story.
I kind of wish that I didn't know that Topher Grace was playing David Duke. Because then when you first see him, you'd be like, oh shit, that's Topher Grace. And then he says, this is David Duke. And then you're like, but I knew that from the get go.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a bunch of like very kind of small scenes. The drive range scene that you're talking about. Oh, there's at one point, uh, he says to David Duke, "You're a great white American," and he's like, "Is there any other kind?" Um, and so then he has this scene with Patrice, and there's a bunch of scenes with Patrice where he's like hiding who he is, and then she tells him like you can't change cops from the inside. And then at the end she gets mad at him, and he's like, "I'm literally investigating the KKK," and he kind of makes this point to her like, I'm actually doing something right here. You know what I mean? Like I am saving like is helping to save black lives, and she's just like, I am not. She's not having it, and it's kind of like a this movie came out before 2020 when you had the George Floyd killing and sort of like the very like vitriolic like language around cops and how like it was basically drew sides and you had like all cops are bastards, things like that. But that like a lot of that Patrice represented a lot of like that. Like there are no good cops. That like the whole institution is racist, and like so like having that sort of viewpoint and John David Washington being a cop but being in love with her or infatuated with her. I don't know it's sort of an interesting part of this movie that also just like brings the plot together at the end.
There's a scene where they're walking in the park and they're talking about black exploitation films and different black like actor iconic roles that they've played, and I like how it was almost like he was vetting him, not vetting her. Um, she was saying like she doesn't like police officers, like you said, but then he was like, "Well, how do you feel about like Shaft versus some other guys?" Like she's like, "Oh,
Superfly.
Superfly." She's like, I don't know, because they're Shaft and Superfly are both detectives, right? I believe.
Superfly's a pimp,
Oh, Superfly's a pimp. Let's
and
see.
she didn't like that he was a pimp.
Well, yeah, okay. So, but she's like, "Oh, I'll take detective any day." But it was like almost a test. He's like trying to like see like, if I come out as a detective, is that gonna make her like me better? And actually, that's what he does instead of being. And I don't think he's a detective, right? He's just a cop, undercover cop, right? But then he tells her, she's like, "Are you a cop?" He's like, "No, I'm a detective." Which to him, probably he thinks he's saved by that. Like that sounds better.
Yeah. So we then have Felix goes to Ron's place and finds John David Washington and Patrice there. And then tells Driver, "Hey, you have a twin." And he's like, "Well, my number is unlisted, so you wouldn't have found me there." Um, and then there's this kind of cool scene with Driver afterwards talking to John David Washington. He's like, "I was never Jewish, right? I am Jewish, but I never had a bar mitzvah. I didn't go to any bar mitzvahs." He's like, "And now I'm down in this racist basement, like denying it every day." You know what I mean? Like and you can kind of see that he's starting to realize like how important this is and how like it affects him too. It doesn't just affect John David Washington because he's black. Like it affects him, as a Jewish person, but just in general as like an American. Um, And we next get to the attempted cross burning where Ivanhoe's like, "Do you know anything about C4?" And like, there's this cool little bit where John David Washington's doing it, but a lot of the Klan people are doing it. Felix is doing it, where like, as they're driving, they're just listening to David Duke's speeches, but done
Yeah.
by Topher Grace.
Yeah.
And it is just this really cool part of like, it's continually making the point of like how bad these people are, how dangerous they are, just allowing them to like kind of run dormant.
It's kind of funny because when they first meet, they're this KKK and they don't want to be called KKK because they know that that sounds bad. So they're like, it's not KKK, it's the organization, right? And David Duke isn't the head chief Klansman; he's the director, right? So they have all this like coding, but they don't shy away from their hate, but they know that like society frowns upon it. I always found that interesting. It's like the Proud Boys, right? Like nowadays, it's like, oh, we're racist and we're happy about it, but then they go out in public and wear masks like fucking cowards. So it's like it's all this like uh, hypocritical stuff they say, but then you have like, if I remember correctly, it's like David Duke has never been caught with the hood over his head or anything like that. Um, Oh, it's the bar scene where he's like, "Yeah, but we're not violent, right? We're not a violent uh
We're not
organization."
violent anymore. We just we burn some crosses here and there. There there is this funny back and forth with David Duke is describing when he had like basically like a black nanny. And he's like, "Yeah, Pinky was my Hattie McDaniel talking about Gone with the Wind." And then Ron tells him this story about, I knew a black kid once when I was like 7. We called him
Yeah.
Butter Biscuit because he loved his mom's butter biscuits. And then my dad one day found out I couldn't play with him. And David Duke was like, it sounds like your dad was a good man. And like the look on John David Washington's face, I was like, were you Butter Biscuit?
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking the exact same thing. It was either that or his dad told him not to play with a white kid.
No, I think the white kid's dad probably said it. So there's this little like side plot which I don't know, it adds color to the movie, but like Walter is like, "Hey, I don't have the votes to be reelected anymore." I don't know why you would laugh at that. I don't have votes to be elected
You know
anymore.
why?
And then he asks Ron to run because he's like, we can't let Felix run, which is an interesting. Like, I don't, yeah. But then Ron's like, oh, I can't run because my dad, is sick. And then he's like, yeah, my dad's sick in Dallas. He's like, I thought you said
El
what, El
Paso, El
Paso. And
Paso.
he's like,
Yeah.
did I? Oh, well, Dallas is the layover city or whatever. And it's like, I don't know. That doesn't turn into anything. I think maybe it's just like more ammunition for Felix being like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, this guy can't be trusted.
It's that. It's raising the audience tension and suspense too. Like, are they going to get caught? And Walter's his name, right?
Yeah, the leader of that
Mm-hmm.
chapter.
Yeah. So he's like, look, I might be a racist, but Felix is a bad racist. That's what it felt like to me he was saying at that moment.
Well, it was like he's dangerous, right?
Like
Like
hot-headed
he's gonna
and
take it too far. He's just not a good leader, which is
well,
true.
they're always disagreeing. Like Felix is like, "Oh, you got to take this Jew lie detector test," and I got like this gun pointed in your face. And Walter's like,
I
"Dude,
like when
can you chill?"
when he takes him into the room. He's like, "This is why we can't keep members."
Yeah,
um, so Felix has Ron come over again. And what's funny is Felix calls John David Washington as Ron. He's like, "Hey, can you come over?" And then it cuts to Driver walking up to the house, and I was like, "Oh fuck, are they gonna get caught?" But it was just like
that's
a cut in the movie.
yeah. Actually,
And
I believe that it wasn't even like that kind of cut. I think you even heard the phone conversation as he's walking up to the
correct.
house.
Yeah, but it's just like a kind of a fun way to like do the movie. It's just like artistic. But yeah, I was
Yeah.
confused at first, like, oh shit. Um, and then he's like, always have a gun on you, and you have Ivanhoe like fucking pointing the gun at his head. He's like, I know how to, I know how to be safe. Um, and then the scene we talked about earlier, Felix with his wife, where she's like having second thoughts, but then, oh, I'm so looking forward to this. I'm glad it's finally here.
Oh, dude, there's something like you have the cross burning in the end, and you have them in the church like putting on their hoods and stuff, and it's bad, and it gives you an icky feeling. But there was no scene more stomach churning than Felix and his wife fucking laying in bed together, him like spooning her, talking about killing black people. I was just like, ugh, disgusting.
I think the Harry Belafonte scene where he's talking about the guy who was really pulled out of the courtroom and his testicles cut off in the middle of the street, and then he was burned for hours on end was more stomach churning to me.
Okay, that was pretty bad. But
Pretty fucking awful. It's a
what do
true
you
story.
what do you think Spike was trying to say when he had like the parallel of white power, and then black power, black power?
I mean, that's a common thing he does though, right? Because he did the same thing in Miracle at St. Anna, where he had the German guy and the Italians
Praying?
and the black guys all praying at the same time. And then he did something similar. He showed like in Malcolm X, like Malcolm X getting ready while the people who were going to kill him ready. He always does that juxtaposition of like the opposing forces coming at each other.
At first I was like, is he trying to say like the being radical is bad, like no matter which side you're on? But the more I think about it, it's like that doesn't make sense for Spike Lee to take that position. The more I thought about it, it's like you have the radical Black Panthers being like black power, but as you're watching the guy's whole speech and everything, you don't feel a sense of harm. Like you don't feel like they're going to hurt people or they're not danger, right? You don't have a feel of danger when you see them. Even with their hands in the air and them shouting, you don't feel danger. And then there's not even that many white people being inducted into the KKK in that area, in that space. And then they're all sitting down and they're not like they're not that fired up about it, but you have this immense sense of danger um when you're watching them. And I felt like that was more of what he was trying to say. It's like you have, you know, the the both radical, but only one you feel danger towards.
I also think he was making the point of like black power is like a natural response to like white power to like defend themselves against like racism and like the results of that, like people being killed.
Yeah.
um then John David Washington meets an FBI agent, and we find out those two guys that from earlier worked at NORAD, and he's like, these are fucking top security people who are just members of the KKK. We don't really even know what happened with them. I guess they got taken somewhere in a black bag, hopefully. And then the FBI is like, yeah, we're not involved with this at all. We like never had this conversation. And he tries to warn Patrice, but she basically like breaks up with him and calls him like a house, not a nice word. Um, and then Driver's
We
like,
we learned about those in Django Unchained.
I hopefully, yeah, okay. And then Driver is mad at him for telling Patrice about this. He's like, that's not your fucking job to do that. And then Felix says Felix calls and tells them that the march is off. I guess there was a Klan march that was happening. That was what was happening at the same time that the speech was supposed to be happening with the Black Power movement. And then this is where I'm just like, all right, is this bad writing or is the chief a part of the Klan? Because he tells John David Washington to go guard David Duke. And it makes absolutely no fucking sense. And I was like, Felix saw him. And now he's going to see that that's Ron Stallworth. And then Ron Stallworth is a cop.
Forget that. Forget that. Even back when he got the identity mixed up in the phone book, which he didn't, but he looked him up in the phone book. He went to Ron Stallworth's apartment, saw him, and then saw Patrice in the background and recognized him. Or sorry, recognized her. How did that not how did he not connect it that way?
Connect what?
Coincidentally, the number one protester that you're against, that you want to blow up, you just so happen to pick the guys by the same name who just joined the KKK, and she's at his house. I mean, and the only reason I guess Felix didn't recognize him at the David Duke thing is because he was wearing glasses, right?
I guess it almost felt like the way he acted it that he did recognize him, but he was just keeping it under his hat because that other guy comes up to him and he's like, "Hey, that dude's a cop," and he's like, "Yeah, I know," and that black guy's a cop too. Like he didn't seem to have a moment of realization because at first when John David Washington gets there, Felix like talks to him, basically talks down to him, like know your place, like you're black, we hate you, and it seems like he doesn't recognize him. I was like, okay, I guess he just thinks they all look alike. He's
I
he
think that
doesn't.
was part of it too. Yeah.
I don't know, but then the way he acts, it's like he knew the whole time. I don't know. It's very confusing, but it's just like it makes no sense for the chief. There's no other fucking cops that can do this. Why don't you send the racist cop? He would love to go hang out with David Duke. Maybe that's why he doesn't. He's like, I can't send Landers because he's just gonna fucking end up a member if I send him. Like I can't. I have to keep him away.
um. Yeah. There's the older guy that works in the same task force as John David and Adam Driver. I don't know his name, but he could have sent him maybe. He's
There's
white.
tons of cops that could have gone. There's no reason for him to be the one that goes.
Yeah. It made no sense, and then he got so close to him, and dude, when he asked for a Polaroid, I was dying. I was dying. And then he like hugged them and they freaked out about that. I was like, holy shit.
Well, and so like the way Driver talks to him, he's like uses very bad language and tells him to get the fuck out of there. And then afterwards, when the movie's almost over, he's like, "Dude, that fucking picture, I fucking loved that." He's just like so happy about it. Um, so Felix is preparing his wife for a bomb, and then this is where we sort of have like the intercut of the meeting of the Black Panthers with the speech about the guy who was basically like lynched and killed, and the white, the white group. And there's also this funny part where like David Duke is speaking, and then you see all the white waitresses smiling as it pans across them, and then the black waiters, and the one guy's like, "Ah, fuck! If I had known this was a Klan meeting, I wouldn't work today."
Dude, when it was panning over the black waiters and it lands on that one guy that talks, I was just sitting there watching it. I'm like, please, please say something. Like, I know whatever you're about to say is going to be fucking gold. So please say something. And it was, and I was very happy. I was just like, oh my. He's like, fuck this shit.
So in the meeting, he's talking about this guy Jesse Washington who was killed, and he said, he was convicted after 4 minutes, and then he goes into details about what happened to him. It's like that happened in 1816, 200 years ago, and it was incredibly hard to listen to. Like I was like, please stop telling me about this. Um, and then at one point he says Jesse was killed in part because of Birth of a Nation, which actually doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. I wrote that down, but that doesn't make any sense.
No, no, no. I think because they were watching Birth of a Nation.
I know, but he said the guy speaking said something about Birth of a Nation, and then it cuts to the Klan meeting where they watch. Birth of a Nation is a 2 hour and 5 minute movie, so you just have this induction ceremony, and then you have to sit there and watch a 2 hour movie. It's just funny, and there's this little tidbit about so Spike Lee went to NYU film school. In there, they taught Birth of a Nation because this movie is so old, but like it's very technically advanced in like some of the ways they shot it. And he was upset that he's like, you're really just underplaying the just rampant racism of this movie. It's a movie about the Klan. And he almost got expelled for that because like he, responded to the professors. I think it was either a movie or a letter, basically like, this is fucking ridiculous. And they tried to get him expelled, and he didn't, obviously. Um, there's also this parallel. You talked about John David Washington during the Black Panther speech in the beginning. Is he cheering because he's enjoying it or whatever? But then Driver standing up like a standing ovation to Birth of a Nation, trying to fit in, is just hilarious.
Also, Felix's fucking wife narrating the whole fucking thing. I was just like, they had to add that in there, right? Because she would be the worst person to go see any fucking movie with. Like, she's that type of person. And I think we all can resonate with hating that type of person. Bad enough she's a racist, worse that she's someone who talks during a movie.
Worse.
Kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh, and he also talked about Birth of a Nation was like Woodrow Wilson showed it at the White House, right? And so he's like putting it in the context of like, this is not some like movie that just happened to be made like independently, right? This was a fucking huge movie, and like,
yeah,
it's about the KKK. So this is something that never pays off. Felix goes up to David Duke at the party afterwards. There's a cocktail hour after you watch a 2 hour movie. And he goes to shake David Duke's hand, and he does like Morse code on his wrist.
Okay. I thought that was going to do something.
It did nothing.
It did nothing. It actually made everything much more confusing. Because you have the Morse code, and then I disagree with you. You do have a moment where Felix is like looking at Adam Driver, then looking back at John David, and then looking back at Adam Driver. And I think in that moment, that's his moment of realization. He's like, he's a cop and he's a cop. They're both cops, right? But then you have that other guy who's like, I know it was the cop because he put me in the put me in jail. But I love Adam Driver's. I'm backtracking a little bit, but I want to mention I love Adam Driver's moment where David Duke's like, "How does he know you?" And he's like, "Oh, we served time in prison together." Um, but anyway, so the Morse code happened, and then you have him sending his wife off, don't you? That happens after. It's almost
Yes.
like it's almost like he's telling David Duke it's on, but it's shot like it would have been him telling him like you're in trouble. I don't know, dude. I don't know.
You know, that's actually a very good point. That actually is probably what the movie is sort of intimating, that David Duke was sort of involved with this, right? You know, because there's this Walter is like, oh, you know, this isn't kind of what we're doing, and you see, it sort of seems like Felix is doing this kind of explosion thing on his own. So maybe he's telling David Duke about it secretly, like, hey, we're about to detonate this device, and sort of implicating that he was in on it. Maybe that's kind of sort of the purpose of it. And it's like maybe you do it that way to avoid any like you're implying that he knew about it, but you don't want to get sued.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's already pretty some like defamation shit in there about David Duke anyways. He could probably try
I
to.
don't know. He was in the Klan. I don't know. I mean, anything else? I don't know what else was going to ruin his reputation that
I mean,
much.
I
You
guess
know?
you're right. Like, why would he deny that at that point? Now, when Felix's wife is going to plant the bomb at Patrice's house, I was in my head trying to think of a million different ways she could fuck this up. And one of the ways I thought would be really funny is like she never planted it, so she had it in her purse. First of all, it made it. I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around, but I'm thinking about a bunch of things here. Didn't it make it seem like she had the trigger because he was teaching her how to use the trigger, but she never had the trigger. They did.
I think no.
Felix.
They were telling her how to arm it. So yeah, I don't. They didn't really imply that she had the trigger. They were telling her you have to click this so that it's armed, because you don't want it to just always be armed.
No, I guess you're right. But I thought like since she couldn't put it in the box in the mailbox, she had it on her when she was like walking away. I think what would have been a funny scene too is like those two racist cops that like put down John David Washington um in defense of her, and it would be funny like Felix and them roll up and then the two racist cops is like with her like on the other side of the street and they blow her up along with the cops while like John David Washington's like on the ground. I was like maybe that is one way, or she accidentally leaves it in the banquet hall or something. I was thinking of like all different kind of ways she could fuck it up.
So Felix is about to spill the beans to David Duke that Driver is a Jewish cop, or maybe they don't know he's Jewish at this point. They suspect. He's suspected heavily this whole time that he's wanted to see his dick.
Oh, we're back there. Okay.
Yeah, you sort of decide to skip ahead a little bit. I'm just sort of, putting us in context. And he gets this call from his wife that she's like, the cops are everywhere. And he's like, all right, well, we got to go to plan B. And so plan B is to set the bomb up at Patrice's. And John David Washington figures this out, and Driver figures this out. And this last scene is set up absolutely fucking perfectly. From Connie trying to stick it in the mailbox, but it's too big. So they just didn't plan this shit out at all. She then has to like double around to avoid Patrice. She goes to the car. She hears the squeal, and the camera makes it look like she keeps it. The camera does not make it seem like she left it there to me.
It doesn't. No, it actually leaves it up in the air. You don't know.
I thought she still had it. I thought she didn't have enough time to plant it, and definitely not enough time to click it on. Maybe she'd already clicked it on. So then John David Washington chases her down, and then just in the most frustrating turn of events, which it sort of makes sense because like he is the first black cop. So these other cops like not knowing, although like, is this just a different town with a different police force? But they just immediately like start beating him up and arresting him. And Connie, in just like perfect fashion, is like, he tried to rape me, which the cops, why are you believing that? But she's like, he was attacking me, da 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 da. And then Driver comes up.
Well, Felix comes up.
So the explosion happens first, I guess.
Yeah,
Yes. So
yeah.
Felix comes up right next to the car, goes to explode it, and it fucking kills him, that other guy, and Ivanhoe. And I was like, oh, that's fucking perfect. And then just Driver coming up, he's like, he just throws his badge at him. He's like, he's a fucking cop, you idiots. Like, it's so like, it's a subtle thing here. which most of the movie is not very subtle. But when the cops show up, John David Washington has to like have his hand shown the whole time, and is like, I'm a cop, but he has to let himself get arrested, get thrown on the ground, get beaten, because if he does anything, he's gonna get shot in the fucking head.
Yeah.
And Adam Driver, who is white, walks up and throws his fucking badge at the cop,
Even
tells him to
before that,
fuck off.
even before Adam Driver even grabs his badge, he jumps out of the car with his gun drawn, pointed at the cops, and the
Yeah.
cops are like, "Well, hello, upstanding citizen. What is going on here today?" And then he takes out his badge and throws it to them and calls them fucking idiots. But you're right, it is so frustrating. It is one of the most frustrating parts of the movie, where just because he's white, Adam Driver can just come out guns ablazing.
Well, that's not the frustrating part is the way they treated John David Washington, right? And he's like, I have my badge right here, and they're like, we're not even going to look at it.
No, we're not even gonna look at it. It's in my pocket, and they're like, "Nah, fuck that." And, oh my god, I was
A
like,
black cop? Absolutely not. So the next scene after this is the setup of Landers, and you're like, wow, this is a very happy ending for a Spike Lee movie. You know,
No.
like they get the racist cop too, and he's like going to jail, and the chief is in on it, and everyone's high fiving. But then the next day, the chief stops the investigation. Not only stops it, but it's like, I want all the evidence of this investigation destroyed. And he even tells Ron, like, you should probably take a vacation. And it's just like completely fucks them over. And he's about to leave, and then he gets the final call from David Duke. And like I said, this didn't really happen, but man, it's so funny. And like the lingering on Topher Grace as he just realizes he's been talking to this black guy this whole time is so funny.
You have this other scene too where he's talking to them, and then like the other people a part of the investigation are like around John David Washington's desk, and they're like snickering and laughing and shit. Um, I think it's just like it's so cathartic to have scenes like this where you're just like fucking making fun of the stupidity of these people. Um, on top of that, there's the part where they're like, you have to get rid of everything in the investigation, and it shows John David Washington ripping up documents and throwing them in the trash, right?
Yep.
You have the next, like the scene ending this movie is him in his apartment, which I guess now he shares with Patrice.
I think she's just at his place.
It makes it seem that way. Whatever.
Well, and there was an explosion at her house. She's probably staying over.
It didn't you feel like the whole movie was setting up that after they get rid of all the evidence, I would love to have seen it where it's like he still takes that picture of him and David Duke and sticks it in the evidence locker. Like
Probably.
that's the only bit of evidence that's left from the investigation.
I mean, I doubt he got rid of all the evidence in real life.
Yeah, maybe. I just felt like he was sitting there with his KKK membership card, which is so funny that that is even a thing. And then
Well, you can't call yourself a card-carrying member if there's not real cards. You know what I mean?
But I wish we just saw that picture one more time.
That is true. Yeah, you would like to see it. Apparently, the real Ron Stallworth like carries the KKK card in his wallet like to this day, and he was like, I just thought it would be funny if I died one day and someone found it in my wallet.
It would be funny.
So the movie ends in like a very sour note, obviously, like not like as a bummer almost. So this movie was being edited when Charlottesville happened, and so that sort of ending, and almost in the memory of the woman who was killed by the guy that drove through the crowd.
Yeah.
That was all added. Spike actually called her mother and asked if he could do it. There, at one point, this guy in the crowd at the KKK luncheon or whatever says, I want to make America great again. And I was just thinking, so like when something's ADR, it's pretty fucking obvious. So like that sounded like that guy was in the room. Like it didn't sound like very noticeable ADR, but I guess it could have been. But I was just curious if that part got added too when they added the Charlottesville stuff in and they added the Trump speech. I'd be curious to know what, how much of the Trump connection was being made in this movie before the Charlottesville stuff was added. It's kind of interesting too. A lot of people Trump's response to Charlottesville, like the quote that most people use is like they're good people on both sides. And he got a lot of shit for that. And so people will counter with, well, that wasn't the full thing he said. He said a lot of other stuff. There's more nuance than that. And I like that Spike just used like most of the quote, like used a bunch of the quotes. And it's like, I don't know how you explain away what he said. Like
Yeah.
it's very poorly explained. Um,
Trump is one of those like people who talks before he thinks, sort of guys. And
Sailor recognizes a sailor.
shut up, whatever. There's also this was made in 2018, so the production probably started in 2017. So Trump's "Make America Great Again," his what do you call it? His uh, slogan was already like wildly known. But did you know that that was also like a slogan during Ronald Reagan's time?
No,
Are you saying no, it wasn't, or no, you didn't know?
no. You asked me if I knew. I said no.
Oh, okay. So I mean, he could have been taking from that. I mean that was more.
I'm def no. Well, first of all, because Reagan was president after this movie was supposed to take place, so I'm definitely sure it was a commentary on Trump. This
I'm
is
saying it
ma-
could have been a commentary on both. It doesn't matter.
I would bet all the money in my bank account. um, yeah, I like. I think the connection at the end. When I first saw it, I was like, I don't know. It's definitely like the way it ends the movie is pretty rough. Especially we've already had some rough scenes, like we talked about the speech from Harry Belafonte. But I think when you have the context of like Spike was editing this movie, this happened, something like it obviously profoundly affected him and a lot of people in this country. And he just felt the need to add this and in remembrance of this woman who died. It was kind of like I don't know, it makes the movie like all that more powerful. It's just like it's funny that the vibe of this movie is kind of light for a subject matter like this, and then to like you have the one speech about the lynching, and then and then this uh is
But
different than the
it's
rest of it.
kind of that's what is kind of great about it too, because it's light, not in subject matter, but in tone, and it kind of makes it easily digestible for a general audience to take it in. Because at times it's kind of like a PI movie, at times it's like a action movie, but it's this, right? It's very politically driven, but it's easily digestible. And I think that's great because then it has a chance to make a lot of people aware of this sort of thing. Especially like a lot of younger people who might not be that aware of it. And I was talking about it earlier, but maybe it's one of Spike Lee's most like uh, blockbusterish type of movies, like general audience type of
So
movies.
this movie is the highest grossing movie of Spike's career after Inside Man.
Exactly. My point exactly. And it's like way more politically and racially driven than Inside Man, too.
So fun facts: the real Ron Stallworth wanted Denzel Washington to play him, but he was like, "All right, I'll take John David." He was like excited that it was his son. Apparently, there were no deleted scenes in this movie. Like everything that got shot
Nice.
is in this movie, which is actually pretty cool. This was the first Spike Lee film since Old Boy to be shot on film. Old Boy being shot on film is kind of crazy to me because that movie looks so bad. As you and I were talking off the pod the other day.
That makes me even more mad about that fucking movie. And if people don't know about me, I fucking hate Spike Lee's remake of Old Boy.
We've said
Um,
it on like every Spike Lee pod we've done so far. If they've listened, they know.
well, the thing is, too, it's like I barely watched any Spike Lee movies before this month. And so, like, watching Do the Right Thing, Malcolm X, Miracle at St. Anna, 25th Hour, and then only having watched Old Boy and Inside Man before this is like maybe Spike Lee isn't that great of a director. But now watching all of his movies or a lot of his movies, I know he's a great director. So it's like, where did it go so wrong with Old Boy?
So this was produced in part by Blumhouse, which I did not know. And the last thing, I was getting confused earlier. So the story Harry Belafonte was talking about, Jesse Washington, that happened in 1916, and they did feel in part like Birth of a Nation sort of like made that like possible in people's head, like that was partly responsible for people doing that to that guy.
Like they were
Um,
watching the movie and thinking, "Oh,
no,
that's
that
okay."
yeah, that movie sort of stoked racist tendencies in people, and then they fucking murdered this guy in the middle of the street as the government just watched and let it happen. Um, After that, it's really hard to talk about how great this movie was, but it was, and it was very funny, and it had moments that kicked you in the gut. I I don't know. This has been a great month of Spike Lee movies, and it's funny. Like we did Inside Man, what, a year or two ago, and I was always like, "That's my favorite," and I still think it is. But man, like we didn't do a bad movie this month. We did 5, right? Like
Yeah,
there are Spike Lee movies that do not talk about Old Boy again. There are other Spike Lee movies that are like supposed to not be great. I've had basketball in the background the whole time, and it's the Knicks versus the Brooklyn Nets, and Spike Lee keeps being shown on the TV because he always goes to Knicks games. I just think it's hilarious.
that's funny.
This movie is great, and I've really enjoyed Spike Lee month.
No, this actually might be. I was saying Miracle of Saint Anna might be my favorite Spike Lee movie, and then I watched BlacKkKlansman, and this might be my favorite Spike Lee movie. And it's one of those movies that's very similar to Jojo Rabbit, where it has you thinking about it long after you've watched it, and I don't know, it's so fucking good. It's so good. And I remember too, having like watching the commercials and trailers for this movie and thinking it's one of those movies that I was like, I'm gonna definitely see that when movies come out. And then I just never fucking did. And I'm just so like, why? But I remedied that. So,
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
and this is Alon, and we finally watched
Black
Black
Klansman.
Klansman.